So welcome to the Art Path. I'm Sky, the navigator. I basically do all the button pushing for Thompson. And I set up the recording, and then I set up the Facebook. And I just want to remind folks that the Art Path is supported by Herbal Gardens Wellness, that's serving a lot of the needs of Native America throughout Indian country. But mostly concentrated here in Denver and some in Oklahoma. So please visit their gift shop and purchase a mug for me because I need the coyote on my table. So welcome to the Art Path, and looking forward to hearing the perspective, the visionary perspective of an editor of a magazine. Take it off, Thompson. Thanks for having us.
I was excited to see that you're editor of the First Americans Art Magazine.
Yeah, and I can put into the chat, we have a couple of issues available for free because they're so rare, I don't want to sell them. So I'll put that in the chat. But anyway, yeah. So here in the chat on issue, if you look up First American Art Magazine, there's a couple of issues that are available free. We did, the Herd Fair coming up in the spring in Phoenix. For a couple of years, we did their programs. So we tried to provide original content there. So those are available free too. So.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and then our pilot issue.
Yeah. So, what I was wanting to see, because I love the work that you do. What got you started in painting?
Oh, painting. So I don't paint that much anymore, except with my 7-year-old niece. I was just thinking, it's like, we need to get together and do a watercolor workshop. But painting is so time consuming. But yeah, so I grew up in Oklahoma. My father was, he was a professor in American Indian Studies, and he just had the idea that you're going to be a painter. Like he taught me Cherokee syllabary, how to say Dojua, redbird, and taught me how to sign my paintings in Cherokee when I was like 6, So I love when you see little kids at art openings, I'm like, I feel your pain, little kid. But I was lucky because my brother and me and my sister, we all lived on Bacone College campus back in the 70s. I'm old, I'm 50, so it's weirdly liberating to be 50. But I lived at Bacone, and the 70s were such an, as you all know, really exciting. Well, maybe not Chad, but it was really an exciting time. It was really kind of revolutionary. So I was at Bacone, so you have Indian people from all over, and then we had Micronesians. My dad was head of the Micronesian club, so we took them all to the Gulf of Mexico because they were a little landlocked in Muskogee, Oklahoma. But we played at the Adaloa Lodge. And, as a kid, you don't even think of anything of, oh, I met Ruthie Black Jones. Oh, I knew Joan Hill. But you didn't think anything about these people. They were just people you saw at art shows. And now I'm like, oh, my God. But we played at Adaloa Lodge when Dick West was still in there because he tried to retire. And they're like, come back, come back. And if you know Dick West, he's Cheyenne. He's passed on. He was a peace chief. He was amazing. He was a visionary artist. He was an incredible artist in his own right, but he was also extremely encouraging of women artists. So many women artists took painting classes under him in the 70s. And I just thought it was totally normal to be a woman painter. And now, in retrospect, I realized I was just in this little cocoon of women that really struggled. So Sharon Aton Harjo, if you know her, she's Kiowa. She had to sign her name, Aton Harjo, a lot of times because people wouldn't buy art. They wouldn't buy, and 70s weren't that long ago. They wouldn't buy painting by a woman. And she had a horrible story. I mean, she persevered, but she went to New York City for an art show that she was invited in, and they were shocked she was a woman. So in the Native art world, it's small, but it's large. But it's you realize every opportunity that you have is because someone created that opportunity. Every path you have is because someone paved that path for you. And I painted when I was a kid. I was kind of force-fed native art like intensely by my parents. So I was like, I rebel. I hate art. I actually flunked art in high school. My teacher's like, I've only flunked 2 students and you're one of them. But I actually, when I went to I had to show them a copy of my diploma because my grades were so terrible in high school. I did graduate, but I had a 1 point GPA. And I was
Wow.
like, what? But I moved to San Francisco. You know how it is if you're from Oklahoma, you're like, I want to get out. So I turned 18. I was like, woohoo, San Francisco, fun time. And it happened really gradually that I realized how wonderful everything I'd been exposed to was. So there was the Zuni Pueblo had a what do you call it, a co-op on Unions. Oh, it'll come to me. Union Street. Anyway, this really fancy shopping district. I'm forgetting my streets, which is terrible. But yeah, and I was just like, oh, I would just go in there. And I finally bought a turquoise bracelet because, of course, you grow up, you're around all this Southwest jewelry, all this Zuni art. And it's like, I didn't appreciate at Bacon, we had Zuni students and Zuni painters. I didn't appreciate it. So it took going to San Francisco and be like, oh. And then if you all recall 1992, when it was the 500th anniversary of Columbus. So that was kind of an awakening. In San Francisco, they'll do sunrise ceremonies at Alcatraz Island, inspired by, all the activism in Alcatraz starting in 1969. And I love that there are Oklahomans there. I love that young Wilma Mainkiller was there on Alcatraz at the original occupation. So so that was a big awakening. And just gradually I realized more and more like, wow, Oklahoma. My dad used to say, this place is fascinating. And we're like, whatever, Dad, you're crazy.
No,
Now I get it. And
boring.
yeah. But now First Americans Museum opened and they're so ambitious that they're completely telling actual stories from all the tribes in Oklahoma. And you realize, with all the maps and information, they highlight the Modoc tribes and the Seneca Cayuga. So we have tribes coast to coast here. I mean, it's really kind of incredible. And there were actually there were Turkish visitors that worked with my dad years and years ago, and they really wanted the tribes to come and speak because they're like, okay, how do you all live together and not kill each other? I'm like, wait, we have accomplished something. We should give ourselves a little pat on the back. But I mean, it really is incredible to have this very strong intertribal culture here. And I say intertribal because, in the 70s, things were kind of pan-Indian. And then I think people pulled away because they realized, well, those are kind of stereotypes and we need to learn to be our own people, We need to do our own dances, speak our own languages, and work together, of course, collaborate. That didn't answer your question at all. So so I did flyers, as a teenager does, you do flyers for your band, your friends' bands and such. Mm-hmm. And, occasionally a tattoo design, you're like, don't put that on your body. You're crazy. And then I really, I was like, okay, San Francisco. My brother had died. He'd been killed in 1994. And I was kind of like, I need to get out of San Francisco. I'm just being honest. It's Friday night. And I had heard about the Institute of American Indian Arts, where T.C. Cannon went. I mean, that was it. T.C. Cannon went there. I'm like, oh my, I don't know if you guys are T.C. Cannon crazy, but it's like, he's our ultimate rock star, right? So it's like, yes, I want to go to the school where T.C. Cannon went for sure. So it took a while to get there. And, but I did in 1995. And I kind of love that because, the native art world is so different than the mainstream art world, where the native art world's like, go for it. Like there's many layers of kind of BS that's peeled away, where it's like, sell your art, show your art, go for it. Like, all right. So they really kind of dumped us right into it. They didn't ask if we wanted to be artists. They didn't ask if we were ready to show. They were just like, all right, oh, you painted something? Okay, we're handing this over to the museum studies students and they're going to frame it and we're going to enter you in Red Cloud. It's like, because they're like, okay, these are people where art is sometimes survival. If you're from a rural area where there's not a lot of jobs, Like I've heard that Pine Ridge, South Dakota, 80% of the people live, art is part of their economy, part of their survival and subsistence today. And it's like Pine Ridge does have incredible artists, unbelievable artists, but you don't really think of it like, oh, so it's like for a lot of rural people and people still on reservations, art is survival. And I've heard Zuni Pueblo, bringing them up again. They're the largest Pueblo. They're about 11,000 people. And studies have shown that 2/3 of that tribe depend on art for either a primary or secondary source of income. So I really love the fact that IA is just like, go for it. We are going to help you. We're going to make you professional, and we're going to build up that resume. We're going to give you these shows. You will show. And we were kind of there at a lucky time because the museum shows artists, indigenous artists from all over the world. Back then, they showed students, which is kind of crazy for a museum to be like, okay, students, have a show. Now the students tend to be more in the gift store or something, but it was kind of a lucky time, but kind of crazy, kind of exciting. This Congress, they were congressionally funded. They were funded by the government, and you know how that can go up and down. So Congress, when I was there, cut their budget by 50%. So it's like, what do you do? They're scrambling. So now, of course, Delaware went in after I left, and Delaware saved the day. She's like, we need private funding. We need diverse funding sources. We can never be dependent just on the government. You can't. So things got better, but things were really hectic. But I'm amazed by my class. I went to school with my very distant cousin. You might know Dan Horsechief, I think he's the greatest Cherokee painter there is. He's visionary. Like, I don't know how he does what he does, but the people in our class were just, I think we're scared. We're like, everything was falling apart around us, and they weren't sure the school would continue. So I'm kind of amazed by my classmates and colleagues, because they have just become incredible professionals. So you have Dan McCoy, you have now my names will go, but Jason Begay is an incredible professional journalist. Kelly Church is an NEA fellow. She's a basket weaver. So it's kind of amazing to be in this exciting cohort of people. And I'm still very much in touch with Kelly Church. I went to a lot of art schools because I hated art school, right? Because it can be really pretentious and really obnoxious. So I kept changing schools. So after my dad's like, I wanted to drop out. I was like, school's horrible. I hate college. And my dad's like, why don't you go to my school? So he taught at the University of Science and Arts in Oklahoma in Chickasha. And I don't know if you're familiar with it. He always joked they don't have a football team, so that's why no one's heard of them. But they do have a very successful drag racing team, the Drovers. But yeah, they're kind of a sleeping giant, where they're right there, right near Anadarko and right near, Carnegie. So there's 8 tribes and the Southern Plains tribes that are right there. And it's such a different vibe because people aren't leaving their family. They're still living with their family. So completely different vibe, because everyone's aunties and grandparents are checking in on them. So people are a lot better behaved at USAO. But it was incredible. It was incredible to be exposed to that much cultural knowledge. And then I ended up getting my MFA in San Francisco, many, many colleges later. So transferring colleges is a crappy way to get a degree, but it is a really good way to see how diverse people's approaches to art. Art is so huge. I mean, it's this human expression. Like, people keep trying to put it in boxes, but it's just what we do, like speaking or singing or dancing. So I ultimately got my degree at San Francisco Art Institute, which is really a very experimental school. They really pride themselves on, being a kind of, no one uses the term avant-garde anymore, but, new media, performance, public art interventions, kind of trying to find new ways to intersperse art into life. And I'm here painting birds, so people would be like, why are you here? Why are you here painting this? So, I'm being honest, I do have a little passive aggressive vibe. So I was like, well, I'm going to dig in. So I did, I don't know if y'all have heard of Loyal, Oklahoma, but my sister lived there, and it's right near Kingfisher. There are 70 people who live there. So I just started, I've had a phobia of Western Oklahoma. Like I always think if my car broke down, how would I survive? How would I live off the land? I think I need trees. But yeah, so I dug in and I just painted and painted and painted about Loyal, Oklahoma. I painted cows, and I went to all the events. Like I went to, they can't have the Dairy Queen, so they, because copyright, so they crowned the Dairy Princess. But I went to 4-H club meetings. I painted cows, I painted calves, I painted water towers, I painted speed freaks breaking into people's anhydrous ammonia tanks, because I just listened to the stories of the people that live in this community, and just, kind of paint it back to them. And it's kind of crazy because I kept doing it, and I just kept doing it, that everyone kind of backed off. They're like, all right, this is what you're doing. I painted frogs on fly swatters, and then we ended up having a show in Loyal. So there's a public cafe. Everyone who lives in town has a key to the cafe, and the first person who shows up at the cafe makes the coffee. And then there's the Low Mega Lions Club public building. So it's corrugated tin building. And we had an art show. It was the first art show in the town, and we brought in all these people from Oklahoma City and we tripled the population of the town. It was so much fun. But to me, I'm still not answering your question. To me, painting is just what humans do. And I you can tell I'm pretty blind, but I'm very visual. And during this time at San Francisco Art Institute, where people are like, why the hell are you doing this? Like, I'm all smart. I'm a performance artist. I'm a video artist. It's like, I had a lot of time to think about why painting. And I think you can express more colors in painting than any other form of art. And I'll argue with myself. But printmaking, even though printmaking, you're still using the same pigments, the ability to model and layer with a painting, like you've seen those really impasto paintings where people just layer, and then dig back in. And now we have interference paints where it's kind of changes colors slightly, depending on the angle. You have pearlescent paints. You can encapsulate more colors with painting than anything else. You probably heard that computer lenses and camera lenses, especially greens, they can never see the amount of greens that a human eye can see, so it's like nothing else can capture it, and then also painting is a way to kind of I think it isn't neutral. If you're painting something, usually you care about it. You're lifting it up and you're kind of putting it on a pedestal, and you're like, I spent 800, or maybe that's too much, but I spent 50 hours, painting this painting, like here. And you kind of get that energy that, it's either maybe a fresh, quick energy, or a very, in my case, very laborious, overworked energy. But yeah, I think you can get that. And I always kind of wanted to do a thing where I had a time-lapse camera where I have a window, and I have a TV, and then I have a painting, and it'd be time lapse. So the TV and the computer's the same way. Like, yes, of course, movies are absolutely the language of our time. Every time I see a good movie, I'm like, oh, I'm irrelevant, I'm obsolete. But and everything you see online, yeah, it gets the clicks, it gets the likes, but then the next day, do you remember it? How much do you really retain? Like, oh, I saw a cool YouTube video. I've forgotten it in a month. But, and then a window, you see things changing with the seasons, people walking by, driving by, but a painting stays the same. So I love Dan McCoy, fellow IAI alum. He's Muskogee Creek Potawatomi, citizen Potawatomi descent. And he did this huge painting of Chittiharjo, which if you know Chittiharjo, he's from Hickory Ground, which is where, who's our poet laureate, Joy Harjo's from. Hickory Ground are badasses. But he fought the US government in the 20th century. Like here we had allotment where they broke up the land. They broke up our communal land holdings, which is a way to destroy communal tribal living. And there was surplus land, which they took away. So Muskogee Creek people put their lives on the line. There were several wars, and these are literal wars. in the aughts, in the early 20th century. And so I had this huge painting of Chittaharjo, and I look at it every single day. I also look at this. I have a Karma Henry painting behind me of the little plant growing in the coffee tin. And I was just like, it kind of burns itself into my brain, into my psyche. I had this critique class where it was kind of torture, you know, where if you go to art school, you have critique class with a poor student, you know, they'll have their pieces up and everyone looks at it. So we would only do, in 3 hours, we'd only do 2 students. So you would look at the art for an hour and a half. And it was really fantastic because your understanding of the art, even in just an hour and a half, it transforms so much. So we live in a time where everything's kind of quick, it's disposable, it's in and out of our psyche, but paintings are so different because I don't want to say permanent, but they do last a while. You know, they're around for a while. So this idea of a still fixed image, so you're changing and your mood's changing and how you perceive things are changing, but it's fixed. So I think that's very interesting. I think the role of it has changed very dramatically.
Okay, can I just say the rambling tangent, following every wild turn to get where you're going is the best description of how we find our art I think I've ever heard.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's also like what you don't intend is really important. Like I know that, you know, when you're doing an artist statement, you're supposed to spell everything out. But I mean, sometimes you have to admit like, oh, well, I ran out of this paint, so I use that, you know. And sometimes that weird unintentional thing, or even when the artist doesn't admit it, they're like, no, that's not in there at all. You're like, that is a sexual organ you just painted. You got some issues. You're like, no. You know, so it's like things come through even if we don't want them to, maybe.
What's your dad's name?
What's that? Oh, he's Howard Meredith. So he's passed on.
Oh
and
my God.
He knows
Your
everyone.
dad's Howard? Your dad's Howard?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
wow.
he's such a genius. Like you know, we all joke like, we don't understand his book. So I love his Kata book. His book that he wrote with Vinola Newcomet, because it makes sense. And then he wrote this book I can't recommend enough called Dancing on Common Ground, that it's about how tribes in the Southern Plains, how they found ways to accommodate each other. You know, like how the Wichita and Crows still have this long-standing friendship, and that's gone back centuries. But most of his books, his other books, I'll read them and I'll be like, I don't understand. You know, but he was amazing because he used to work for the Episcopal Church. He worked there in their Indian office and took over from Vine Deloria Jr. So he traveled to all these reservations, but he also could read and comprehend all the logic and philosophy that I don't comprehend. I just don't think that way. So he could, and he listened to the elders, like it felt like he kind of knew everyone and he could synthesize that information. So I'm like, oh.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't know Howard was your dad.
Oh, cool. Yeah, Meredith. There aren't a million Merediths.
Wow.
No, and here, I'll show you. Yeah, sorry, I'm like, I was cleaning, I'm not nice dressed. So he painted for fun, and to me, painting is such work. So this is a catfish. In the 1960s, he did a lot of work up in Alaska, so you can see that Alaskan influence. Like, I wouldn't know if
it reminds me of like the Alaskan salmon.
Yeah, or I would think a manatee. I don't know, a seal. Yeah. But it says catfish in Cherokee, so I'm like, but I love how he's kind of angry. So my dad painted for fun. He would paint a painting and then tuck it away in the closet. So after he passed on, we had a big art show, but we gave all his really close friends one of his paintings, like watercolor landscapes. And people were like, what? I had no idea he painted. So I love having his artwork up. Like, yeah, you can just do it for fun and no one can see it. And that still has a lot of value.
Yeah. I think the thing that that got me when I seen some of your work was, like you were saying, they weren't the stereotypical Indian art that people had saw back in the day in the 90s and 2000. You know, I remember you had a tree that had all these leaves on it and had circular. It was almost like you had little almost like little photographs that you'd painted into it. And the thing that stood out for me wasn't the entire painting, but it was the leaves. And it you know, people say, well, what do you think of the painting? I said, those leaves are great. You know,
So can't see the forest for the trees.
yeah, and people
Fancy the
kind of look
painting
at me like,
leaves.
well, that's only a small part of the painting, you know. I said, but look at that leaf, you know. And you know,
No, I'm really nearsighted. So some of my stuff looks really, because you're supposed to walk away and look at the art. You're like supposed to walk away and like look across the room and be like, does that look good? And it's like sometimes you forget, you get in the flow. So if you see one of my small paintings and you look that close, you'll be like, oh, this makes sense now. Right on, I get it.
so yeah, I think Brent looked at me. I was sitting there and I said, wow, look at this. And he said, yeah, that's when he told me, he said, oh, that's American Meredith. I said, oh, wow. And that's what he said. He said, what do you like about it? And I said, look at that leaf. And he kind of looked at me because it was a big painting. And I thought, he just kind of looked at me like, what about the whole painting? I said, look at that leaf, you know. And I thought,
I had this teacher. Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
I had a teacher at USAO, Hollis Howard, and maybe you guys know him. He did he's non-native, but he did murals around Chickasaw and Chickasha. He gave me good advice where it's like, you know how you hear one good thing from every teacher every semester? He's like, okay, think of all the parts you're painting as baby chickens. You want them all to grow up, so you need to feed everyone a worm. You don't just feed part of it. And I'm like, oh yeah, huh? Like you need to look at the big picture.
Yeah, that's amazing.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's even more amazing that I hadn't met you since you're Howard's daughter. Because I remember.
It was so fun to go to dances with him. So I did Indian Market. Before he passed, he had esophageal cancer, so he passed really quickly. But I got to tell him that was, you know how you have years where like everything starts happening for you. So 2003 was one of those years because I got accepted in Idlejourg and the Herd and Indian Market. So I got to tell him, hey, I'm gonna go to Indian Market. Which when you haven't done Indian Market, you're like, oh, Indian Market, you know, it's a place of legends. But on the way back, I saw a sign. I was driving, you know, you get all these ideas, you talk to everyone on weekend, you're like, yeah. So I was driving back and I saw that sign to go to the Washita massacre site. And I'm like, that's the kind of trip my dad would take me on. So I was like, all right, I went to go see it, you know, just because it reminded me of like just exploring places with him, all these historical places. Oh my God, my mom and me, we were stuck in a car for 3 weeks. You guys have probably done things like this. And we're like, let's go to Crow Fair. All right. But we went to Crow Fair via like everything along the way. You know, we had to stop at, and I'm really grateful we did. We stopped at, you know, Bear Butte. We stopped at, where's the place where the bear scratched on the mesa? It's in, oh my God, I can't believe it. It's in, Close Encounters of the Third Time, Devil's Tower. We went there. Yeah. And then when I was at the Washington massacre site, I was like, oh, yeah, I was like, I got all scared. Like this, I was like, I shouldn't be here. And then this bug flew out and I was like, ah, it's a bug. And I'm like, oh my God. But then I did a painting from that. Like,
so when were you at back home?
Oh, I was a little kid. I was a 6-year-old. I wasn't a student. But it was really, Big Home's kind of amazing. And I really appreciate, I really appreciate Tony Tiger, how he, he got those students together. He cleaned up all the crazy, the rooms filled with papers. And he got those students, he took them to conferences, he got them traveling. And now I'm super happy that, who's there right now? Sorry, Michael Elizondo. Like, he's just a really good, he's a dad, he's really sweet and caring, and very cross-cultural. Like, I know he's a Cheyenne speaker. So it's interesting to have a Cheyenne person back, but he's Cheyenne, he's Ka, he's Chumash. So he has that intertribal perspective. So I think it'll be exciting to see Bacon like back on the map. I think a lot of us are really rooting for that place. And then Ataloa Lodge, I brought that up because, if you've been there, it is a log cabin, right? But it is the first Native American art museum. So it's humble, but it started in 1935. It was started by Mary Ataloa Stone, McClendon Stone. I'm gonna have her name screwed up. She's Chickasaw, and she was the English teacher, and she wasn't the first director of Bacon, but she laid all, she planned it all out, the classes, how things will work, and then they recruited AC Blue Eagle, who is an awesome character. We have all these larger than life characters. I love that he had a kids TV show. Like, that's just the icing on the cake.
Yeah, we had, Bonolo, since you mentioned her, Bonolo had some neighbors across the street who were having a yard sale. And so she went over there, her and Phil, and they went across the street, and she was looking at some of the things that they were selling, and the neighbor says, "Oh, I've got something to show you," and she said, "My mom had one of her students that she taught when they were young come back and gave her a couple of paintings." And she looked at her and she said, "Oh, well, who's the painter?" And she said, "Here, these are two of his paintings." And she said, "Oh, well, you're selling these at your garage sale?" She said, "Oh yeah, I want at least $2 or $3 for them."
Who were they?
They were AC Blue Eagles.
Oh my God.
And Bonolo told her how much they would be worth, and she goes, "Oh my God, I didn't know that."
She was too honest.
Yeah, so I remember that so much. So
I know. Ben Harjo's one that will go out. He'll wake up at the crack of dawn and he'll hit those estate sales. And I just don't wake up that early, so I never make it. Everything's all picked over by then.
Yeah. I like to do that. I used to like to go a lot to garage sales. I went to one here in town, and it was an elderly lady, and she said, "I'm selling this little statue," and it was a little cowboy on a bucking bronco, and she said, she said, "I know it's not an original, but they said it was some sort of like a test sculptor."
Okay, like a Barquette?
Yeah, and so she said, "What do you think I can get for it?" Like that. I said, "Do you know this is a Remington?"
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And she said, "Is it worth something?" I said, "You bet." But some people who see art, they have no idea what it's worth.
Which is good. Keep it that way. No, I'm kidding. No, it's really interesting because Oklahoma definitely, I think there's a lot of insecurity, and I think we sometimes don't appreciate how good and strong things are. So First Americans Museum, our names are too similar. We had the name first, or the magazine had the name first, but it opening is so exciting, and yet they don't have the changing gallery yet. They do have that smaller gallery where hopefully they'll have solo exhibitions, but we need, like, I'm jealous of Tulsa because Tulsa has all these great art venues where you can you can be a guest curator and you can pitch a show. And we have a lot of sleeping giants. We have a lot of buildings here in Oklahoma and a lot of great museums, but yeah, like everything needs to knit together to have like a really thriving, active contemporary native art scene. I mean, we have all the elements and people are definitely trying. I think it's like we're so spread out and we're also so huge. The population is so huge. But it's interesting because like Oklahoma City Museum of Art hasn't really shown Native art until very recently. They had that Fritz Shoulder show, and they're planning more. So it's like, yes, come on board. And then Oklahoma Contemporary, they have a Native curator, so they have more Native art too.
What are you guys planning for your magazine? What is it?
Oh my gosh! So I'm kind of heartbroken. We're late because COVID hit our printers up in Denver, so it is delayed. So it's kind of heartbreaking. There's nothing I can do, but there's nothing they can do. You know, people are out sick. You know, flights are canceled, printers are canceled, but what's coming up down the pipe, and it's interesting because it is very political, Santa Fe, is the 100th anniversary of Santa Fe's Indian market, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, how do you approach that? How do you write intelligently about that? And how do you not say the same thing? So luckily, I have a friend who is a proper art historian. She's got her PhD in art history. So she agreed to co-write with me. So we were just going to write different kind of moments and remembering. So, you know, I'm hoping he'll talk to me, but Bob Houses, you know, he won one year. He did a collaborative piece where it's a green pot and it won this show and everyone freaked out because it was a green pot. So I'm like, really? That was shocking. So I want to like see if I can go back to that time where everyone was freaked out by a green pot. These just strange, weird moments. But it's also interesting because it is the 100th anniversary of Gallup Intertribal Ceremonial, which is a much more small, modest affair. And technically, okay, Gallup Intertribal did start in a different place that had a different name, but it's technically older than Santa Fe Indian Market by a couple weeks. So I'm like, okay, we need to cover that. So I need to find a good writer for that to cover that.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it is really wild to think 100 years of Indian Market.
Yeah, we've been talking about different artists that we brought on here to talk about their art and what they do and what they're planning on doing. And you know, I don't know if does your magazine put in coming events? I don't know.
We do have an events calendar, and that's actually online, and there's a forum. If you email me about an event, I'll put it up, but you make my life easier if you use the form at the bottom. But and I'm like, oh my God, we just started this. I do all this work compiling this calendar, and I'm like, we need to use it. So I've started, if you follow us on Facebook or Instagram, we started just in the last 2 weeks posting kind of little short mentions of what's going on that week. Because it is kind of fun just to, even if we can't go to it, you know, just to kind of get a handle on what's happening. And it is kind of crazy to have a print calendar since everyone's online, but I kind of like having the record. I think there is something special about having something in paper, and like 10 years from now, someone will look up and be like, oh, wait, this is kind of, they'll see currents that we don't see right now. So yes, if you guys are having an art show or if you're having a symposium or conference, like please, you know, free, just send us the information and for sure we'll include it.
That's great. And, you know, we'll, anything that you guys are doing, we'll put it on our Facebook page. And,
oh, cool. Yeah.
In our Instagram. So
yeah.
Anytime you guys are doing something,
I know we have done lunch parties, and unfortunately, you know, it's been COVID, and I wish I had a copy. I was just in the other room looking at them, but I didn't want to write about COVID because I was like, I'm sick of thinking about it and hearing about it on the news. But luckily, Stacy Pratt, who now, you know, she's really helping. She's Muskogee Creek. She's one of the, you know, the Fife sisters. They're really influential, and they have a big art show coming up in August. It's going to be really exciting. at the Museum of Contemporary Native Art. So it's really exciting to hear about Oklahomans over there.
Oh,
But
that's cool.
yeah, she was a really strong advocate that we need to talk about what Indian country is doing during COVID and what are the artists doing during COVID. So we did this issue last no god we've been in this mess for so long, so summer of 2020, where we just talked about how all of these artists responded, because what can you do, you're stuck at home. So these professional, totally celebrated artists, like Carla Hemlock, she's a Mohawk. She's actually from Quebec, but she's right at the border, of New York, and they were here before the border was. She's this world-renowned textile artist, but she and her friends got together and they were sewing hospital scrubs, for the local healthcare workers. And then Will Wilson, he's this, and we're going to cover him this fall, so that's really fun. But Will Wilson's this amazing. He's shown in Russia. He's shown in, Western Europe. He's this. Navajo, if I can't remember that, I'm really screwed. Navajo photographer, and he happened to have access to the equipment, so he started printing facial masks to give to people back on the Navajo reservation to protect them. So I'm so
cool.
grateful that she talked me into covering this, that we have this record of how people use their skills to serve the community.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of good things in the mainstream art world, but there's a lot of BS, because you read about the excess and the money. It's kind of, fascinating, but also revolting when you hear about the art fairs and like what's going on with, Kuwaiti princes and what they're buying at auction. You're like, so I like the native art world more because we're all grounded. We all have aunties, so we'll like kick our butts, basically. But I love the fact that it's all about community first. So it's expected that you're going to give back. Like when people teach, maybe they don't teach formally, but you're if you're a success, you are expected to share. You are expected to give back to the next generation.
And that's basically what we're doing here. We started this because of COVID.
Yeah.
Because I had a lot of friends who weren't being able to go to art shows, and they didn't have an outlet for their stuff, and some of them didn't have the ability to go out and just discuss what they're doing. And like you say, sometimes they're teachers, and we saw that at the very first beginning of this this program that we do. We had people who would talk about what they did to get started, and pretty soon we had kids saying, well, I can do that, and so we've had grade school kids and middle school kids who've been on this program to show what kind of talent they have, and
that's really cool.
All the way through college, and some professional artists. And then there's the rest of us guys who just go out and if we didn't get paint on our face, we get it on a canvas, So it's that I wanted to bring to the community, and make this a community. That's how come, like, we've got some artists who have joined us before, and they're from New York, and some from the West Coast, and they're excited to be here because they get to see artists who are doing things that they haven't seen before, and sometimes it's amazing the connection that we have with one another. Like I give a good example. Joyce Navakoy, when she was on here, she talked to me about her son, and so he was on here last week.
Oh, cool! Right on.
And so we really got to see a lot of a lot of different artists from across the country, and to see the different types of art that's being done. Uh, we've got photographers and beadworkers on here, and painters and carvers, woodworkers, and different sculptors who are all
Yeah.
been part of this. And so it's,
Ballroom dancers.
oh
Yeah.
yeah,
I love the
yeah,
social distance powwow. I think that is like that's an amazing thing
yeah. Our
where all
friend,
these dancers can't
yeah,
travel.
yeah. So we had Michaela, our friend Michaela, who's was ranked sixth in the world for her
Oh,
ballroom
cool.
dancing.
Wow.
So that's that was something that we were excited about, because to us these were just people that we know, just hang around with us at different places, and then you get to talk to them and you get to find out who they are, just like you, just I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time.
Yeah. And I'm so
Like I
sorry
said,
I'm so late.
like I said, I'd seen your work, and sometimes I see you on Facebook, and it's I think, oh yeah, I know who that is. Yeah, well, I don't know who you are, but you know, I've seen your work, and so it's been interesting, just
Yeah.
to see it. But I had no idea you were Howard's
Oh
daughter.
yeah. No, I
Yeah.
always think it's interesting. Native people are always like, will happily, readily tell you everyone they're related to. Like, here, just let's have it all out. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's interesting because I have such a formal education with painting, because you asked me about painting and I immediately went to going to school. It's like, well, that's not right. And I'm about to speak about curating, and I do think I kind of learned curating in a native way, which is the native way is just you learn as a little kid, you just observe, you just watch your elders. So I started curating in I forget how I was 21, and I did a bike messenger show, and I didn't even think like, oh, I can't do it because I watched everyone curate. So I'm like, oh, it can't be that hard. And of course it is. It's really, really hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, it's so interesting. I think I thought it was a native thing where everyone wears a lot of hats, like you're an artist and then you're an art writer and then you're a curator. But I think that's kind of the nature of the art world, that you don't get to just be one thing, and I think that's kind of healthy. And I
Hmm.
do think every artist should at least once in their lifetime curate a show, because then you realize how stressful and nerve-wracking it is, like to handle someone else. Like I'm like, whoa, with my art, because I can repaint it. If I chip it, I'm like, I can fix that. Someone else's art I have to be really careful with. Like I don't touch other people's art. Like when you visit a studio, you're like, don't touch anything, don't hurt it, don't scratch it. But I think it's so good to wear be able to wear these different hats and see things from different perspectives.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I enjoy now about seeing different artists, because the way they see things differently than how I see things. Uh, you know, uh, uh, I see a lot of traditional painting that when I was growing up, and I see what they do now, uh, and it's just amazing to me to see the evolution of painting. I think that's one of the things that gets me excited about art,
Yeah.
is it doesn't it's not stagnant. And I think I was asked one time, what do you think is Indian art? And I said, art done by Indians.
Exactly. Then you
And
have a discussion about who's Indian, then everyone fights because no one can agree.
yeah, yeah. I know I've had to change the title on some shows that I've had, because people were saying, well, those aren't Indians, because they couldn't prove their
Yeah,
descent. And I said, so we're doing a Southwest art show then.
exactly. Yeah. Now it's
And
multicultural.
yeah, so that's one of the things we did. is that even though a majority of the artists were native, we brought in people who were not native, and people enjoyed that. You know, we had people from Japan and things come to visit,
Yeah.
and so it was that kind of excitement to see, you know, the different types of tribes, and even the different communities who would come out to see what the artists were doing. And you know, I talk about different artists that are that are in my mind just sort of crazy guys, because uh, they're my friends, but they're kind of crazy about what they do. Uh, I talked about on here my friend Alistair Bain, and
Who?
his name's Alistair Bain.
Alistair Bain.
Yeah, and he was asked to do a painting, and he said, "What do you want?" You know, it was a commission, and he said, "Well, I want an Indian on a horseback." And he said, "Oh, really? Okay." And so he titled it "Typical Indian on Horseback Painting." And what it was this young Indian man sitting on the horse with all his long hair, with sunglasses and a Iron Maiden T-shirt. and I said, "What?" You know, and I said, "I love that." And I have a good friend. His name's Michael Darrow, and he was asked to do a painting of a teepee,
Mm-hmm.
and so he did the painting, and he painted on the teepee uh, pink flamingos all around the teepee. You know, just it was his idea that this was something different, and you know, and it was funny because we were both in college, and you know his uncle he got a kick out of it, and I said, yeah, I said, you think you do good work? Look at what your nephew did. And he just got a kick out of that. His uncle's name was Alan Hauser. And,
Alan Hauser.
Yeah, so it was pretty cool, but we had a lot of fun. But it's that evolution of how we see what Indian art is as something that's changed. Now it's into this internet things like YouTube and TikTok.
But I think we're all craving the real thing. I think we are craving. I know I am seeing real art, seeing real people.
Yeah. And so,
I'm laying low for now. I can't wait till it gets warm.
Yeah. So that's why we're asking about, different art shows. Because, those of us who are limited in our ability to go out, we want to know what's going on. So that's if we're able to get, some of us that, want to go and see things, we're excited to see them. I went to the museum. Yeah, I went to the museum when it opened, and that's where I got your magazine.
Yeah. I'm glad they let us give it out there.
Yeah, it was great. And so I got to see some of the works, and I got to see some things that I didn't know friends of mine had done, and they had done it for the museum. And I said, wow, I said, you know, I wish I could afford to get some of your stuff, but you know, it's really exciting sometimes to see what we evolved into. You know, modern dance. You know, uh, I think that's one of the things I'm working on now is to get. Well, we had some hip hop artists on here.
Do you know
My
Maggie Boyette, who's Ruthie Blaylock Jones' granddaughter? She's a professional dancer. She's amazing. She works for the Oklahoma Art Institute that does what's it, Quartz Mountain?
oh yeah,
Yeah,
oh
but I
yeah,
think she was classically trained in ballet, but then she does all sorts of new stuff. So she might be someone good to talk to.
oh yeah, yeah.
And she's
That'd be great.
Oklahoman, so she's like all the tribes. She's
Yeah,
Kiowa and
yeah,
Shawnee and Peoria.
that'd be good. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we're
Maggie
trying to
Boyette,
find
she's really cool.
we're trying to find you know, different artists who want to be on here, and it's good to see different ones because we get to show what art is, and that's one of the things that I tell people when they ask about Indian art, and I say if it's something that is creative, if something that brings emotion into your life, that brings uh, something that stirs emotion in your soul, that's Indian art, or that's art, period. And I said, that's simply it, you know, the art. Because we have, like I said, we got photographers on here that we have right now, and like
All right.
Chad, you know, Chad and people who do this kind of work. And then Yanavia's here, and she does,
Yeah.
you know, beadwork. And it's those kind of things that make it universal. So we don't try and put ourselves in a box. And I think that's the biggest thing that I get out of it is that we're not in a box. And you know, listening to you talk about your magazine, that
Yeah.
really gets me excited about it because it's that emotion that you bring to as an editor uh, and what you see in art uh, that makes it you know, an art piece. You know, some people may say, well, it's, you know, that's a business. I said, no, that's to see and develop something in the world that changes people's lives. That's an art, and you know, it's just kind of the way I see things. But I'm kind of goofy, uh, so uh, you know, it's good to see that you know, you're excited so much about the art world.
Yeah, so a big thing for me was all my degrees are in painting, right? But the Institute of American Indian Arts was hiring a early Native American art history teacher. This is 2008. So someone that would teach before 1950, so ancient times to that. And I applied and I got the job. And I'm like, all right. Like no one else would apply would hire someone to teach art history that doesn't have an art history degree. So only IA. But and then I worked for us. My boss was Stephen Wall, Kathleen Wall's dad, if you know him. But he's like, yeah, you're the only person that applied for the job. And I'm like, you didn't have to tell me that. But so I had no idea what I was doing. I'm a terrible teacher. It's fine. But yeah, so I taught back then. They were like Western Hemisphere, North South America. So, and the first class I taught was ancient times to 1850. So I started Tierra del Fuego up to northern Greenland, and I do have a Greenland obsession from that. So I didn't know. And then you also don't trust anything written in a book about natives. You're like, is this true? Like, who did they talk to? Like, you'll hear stories from people that know, like, who people use for informants. I'm like, that person's crazy. Why did they listen to that person? Maybe they belong to the tribe, but they didn't know what they were talking about. So I was nervous as heck, but we did it. We went like a steamroller, up South America, Central America, North America. So, and it was before 1850. But also I would, if you guys know Suzanne Sean Harjo, she's Cheyenne, Southern Cheyenne, and Muskogee Creek, and she's a warrior. She's a policymaker. She's passed all these laws. She's, and of course, all these efforts are many, many, many people, right? But, she's fearless, like the Indian Child Welfare Act, the Indian Freedom of Religion Act, the Indian Arts and Crafts Act, and then, all these efforts to get the National Museum and the American Indian open. So she would be in Santa Fe at the beginning of semester. So I would have her come in and scare the hell out of the students. Because so it was great. Like our first class, because people are very concerned, about cultural sensitivity and looking at this older artwork. Like you probably, when you're in the older section of a museum, you're like, should this stuff be here? How did this stuff come here? What am I looking at? So, I was just like, let's address this head on. So she, talked really plainly about human remains in museums and how she scared the hell out of the students. It was awesome. But it's a good way to start the semester. But she would talk about how they would collect human skulls, in the 1800s. And it was for that racist pseudoscience, phrenology. They thought, they could measure the skull. They abandoned phrenology because it kept proving, by their own standards, it kept proving that other races were more intelligent than the Europeans. But anyway, so they stopped that. They're like, this is fake pseudoscience. But so a lot of stuff is very culturally sensitive, and a lot of things are burial goods. And that's a really hard question that I don't have an answer for. Because, I don't want to be around these items, but in a lot of tribes, each tribe has their own ways and their own, they have to come up with their own answers about how they'll deal with things. So some things are so powerful. You probably heard this like false face mask that you don't even look at a Xerox copy of them. You don't look at a photocopy because that will have some of the power of the living things. And a lot of these items, are, and it's pretty safe to just think of them all as living things. So I had to carefully navigate how not to, something will be beautiful pottery, but it's a funeral urn, so we can't look at that. So in the Amazon, like everything's a funerary urn. It's like, okay, we're not going there. So we studied the earth, because that earth, the what do they call it? Piedra. It'll come to me, but it means Indian black earth. And it was terraformed. It was formed. And there were these huge civilizations in the Amazon, like around the Isle of Marajo, where they would make unbelievable amounts of ceramics and crumble that up and put that into the earth. Like it's completely, everywhere you go, there's like shards of ceramics, because there's not a lot of stones, which is really weird to think about somewhere without stones. So we studied the earth and then we studied, and you can buy these online. But ladies in the old days, before missionaries came in the Amazon, they would wear these tongas, so they're little triangle pubic coverings, and they're ceramic, so they're like a bikini bottom. So you'd have string. So that's what we studied. But I just got hooked, because I just had to buy all these books, because I didn't know anything about anything. I just had to read. I had to talk to people, guest speakers, help save me, my friends, like, tell me about ribbon work. But I was just hooked, because I thought I'd grown up around Native art and I knew stuff. It's like, you never think that, never think you know something. So my mind would just be blown every week, just like, oh my God, no, like everything I thought is out the window. So to me, Native art history is so exciting, because really that is our ancestors speaking to us. Even those tribes, like we have writing only for 200 years, right? Cherokees. But in Mesoamerica, even the writing, the color of the ink they use means something, the directions it goes means something. So we're very visual people, across the Western Hemisphere. And that's really how we communicate generation to generation. So we, especially if your tribe has been removed from its homeland, like Cherokee people, Oklahoma Cherokees have, we're not where our stories are tell about, and we're not around the rock art. So I'm really grateful to be around Pueblo people and hear their stories just keep going and going and going. Like they know where villages were in the 1300s, 1400s. They can name names. I'm just like in awe of people that really know their deep roots, because the landscape tells the story. Like the landscape, the individual portable art, like the ceramics, the textiles, they speak to the landscape. If you guys have been in Ho-Chunk territory and you've seen the effigy mounds, I got to go up and oh my gosh, we had the best two people showing us around, my friend Linda Lomahafta and me. We had Bill Quackenbush, so he's a tribal historic preservation officer, and we had George Greendeer. So their family is very ceremonially involved, and they told us lots of things we can't tell. And I'm like, no, don't tell me anything I can't tell people. I'm good. I don't say anything, but I'm like, no. But so those effigy mounds, they record history, their calendars, they're talking about, the stars, they're talking about the people, they're talking about the clans, and it all, that's kind of the goal, I think, for each individual tribe is, in the old days, before, everything got shattered by colonialism and disease, our portable arts, our songs, our stories, the language. My dad always said the wisdom is embedded in the language. They all worked together, and they all worked together and resonated together in our body art, with the cosmos and with the earth, the below, like the plants and the animals and the fungus, everything worked in a field together. So that's my goal as a Cherokee, is to be able to understand the world on that level. So I really hope someday I can go back to North Carolina and see all the rock art. And I would love to do a tour on the rivers to see our old village sites from boats, because that's an interesting thing too. Before horses were introduced, like people got around by boats. And I know that Creek people here, in Muskogee people, in Oklahoma are trying to bring back those dugout canoes, because people got around, people traveled in the old days. So those waterways are really like, people navigated them up and down. But anyway, I don't know what we're supposed to be talking about, or where we're supposed to go.
Funny, my husband and I are both born and raised Oklahoman.
Okay.
Neither of us are native.
Okay,
my family's Filipino.
Oh, neat, cool, right on.
So, but growing up in Oklahoma, the native history is just so entrenched in Oklahoma history that you can't sever the two.
No, I mean, you can't do it from anywhere, but people try really hard.
Right.
Anywhere in the US.
But I know that's absolutely true, but of course my personal lived experience is Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's been so eye-opening to watch the whole process of the First Americans Museum and to actually hear these stories from the tribal members.
Yes, and it's been a big deal to make those stories be public, because that history is really recent and really raw. Like, I think it makes people very uncomfortable. I mean, people are I think reading about the Dust Bowl here, it was traumatic. Like, people of all backgrounds were traumatized. So there's a lot of like, well, we don't talk about that. I have a PhD student at OU, James Bland, he helps me out in the office. He does a subscription fulfillment. So if anything's late, it's James's fault. But his focus is Spanish colonialism. So one of his arguments that he writes about is how the Filipino experience is so similar to the South American experience because Spanish colonialism. And I really appreciate Charles Mann, how he talks about how there was so much trade back and forth between the Philippines and Mexico and South America. So I'm really glad that we're starting to look at more global conversations instead of like
Spanish colonialism, and then And then the Philippines were straight up colonized and became an American
Yes.
territory.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
United
so we
States
said,
too.
hey, you know what? We're our own people.
Yes, yes.
And we're one of the few people in history that ever successfully did so.
You and the Mapuche.
Right?
Yeah. Do you know the artist? Do you guys know the artist Manuel Ocampo? He's been on my mind. So he's
That name is
Filipino.
really familiar.
He was here. He's hilarious. I love this guy. I've never met him, but I'm his fan. But I'm typing it in. But so he would show in San Francisco. So he got his start because okay, Roman Catholicism. You can say a lot about it, but my God, beautiful artwork, right? So he was kind of a street kid, and he learned how to paint these saints paintings, but he would kind of make them look old. So he was a forger, so he has all these mad technical skills, and he paints on metal, and he can do these, but he does these really biting political commentary that's hilarious. Like, I went to a show in San Francisco, and it was in a nice gallery too, where all the paintings, these gorgeous oil paintings, are on the floor, and he had all the emails and correspondence he had with the curator on the wall, because he was just explaining like what's important. Your relationships to the art world is more important than the art, and you're like, damn. So he was obviously not very happy with the art world, so he moved back to Manila in the Philippines, and he launched the I forget the actual name of it, I'll look it up, but it is essentially the School of Bad Art. So it's like he's teaching people how to be bad artists. I'm like, you're awesome. I'll look it up really quickly. I haven't seen. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say we're going to go ahead and start shutting down the
Okay.
the live feed and the recording.
Yeah.
You're welcome to stay on here with us because we do stay past time.
The real talk.
Yeah, the real
That's,
talk after.
oh my God, that's what I miss when you go to a fancy opening and they're like, ooh, fancy opening, and you're all good and you're well dressed and your hair doesn't look like mine. And then afterward, when everyone like lets loose, I'm like, I miss that so bad. COVID's taken that from me.
So let's go ahead and say goodbye to Facebook.
Bye, Facebook people.
Good night, Facebook land.
Brush your teeth.
Facebook.
Wait, that was about brushing your teeth. It wasn't about anything else.
Night,
Or whatever you want to do. It's Friday night. Have fun. Oh, kitty.